Chicago, 1980. A mission from God and 103 wrecked cars turned the Blues Brothers into a cult phenomenon, built on real musicians playing versions of themselves. Here is where that band and cast ended up. Before Dan Aykroyd ever slid behind the wheel of the Bluesmobile as the deadpan, harmonica-playing Elwood Blues, he had already written the film's original script himself, a free verse document over 300 pages long that director John Landis had to tear apart just to make it shootable. Aykroyd was 27 that year, fresh off his breakout run on Saturday Night Live, and the obsessive, deep-diving instinct behind that unfilmable script came from somewhere real. He has Asperger's syndrome, which he credits for his fixation on the paranormal, a passion that would soon become Ghostbusters. Off-camera, his life was just as cinematic as his characters. He saved co-star Carrie Fisher from choking on a Brussels sprout, proposed on the spot, and the two even took blood tests for a marriage license before she left to reconcile with Paul Simon. Aykroyd went on to marry actress Donna Dixon in 1983, raising 3 daughters, including Danielle, who performs as Vera Sola, before the couple separated in 2022 after 39 years, remaining legally married as co-parents. Now 74, he still tours with the official Blues Brothers band, though nothing tested him like 1982, when he says a piece of himself died alongside his closest friend. That near marriage to Carrie Fisher tells a story just as remarkable, one that began on this same chaotic set. Carrie Fisher never speaks a single word in the Blues Brothers, playing the nameless, rocket launcher-wielding mystery woman who stalks Jake through 3 separate assassination attempts, and yet off-screen she was already one of the most talked-about young actresses alive. At 23, fresh off becoming a global icon as Princess Leia, she spent the Chicago shoot in a tumultuous romance with musician Paul Simon, all while getting engaged to co-star Dan Aykroyd after he saved her life with the Heimlich maneuver. She later admitted the set itself was a haze of heavy cocaine use, part of a routine everyone around her seemed to accept. Fisher went on to briefly marry Simon in 1983, build a long partnership with agent Brian Lord, and raise her daughter Billie Lord, who now carries her mother's legacy forward. Beneath the headlines was a woman quietly changing how Hollywood spoke about mental illness. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 24, she wrote openly about addiction and instability in best-selling books like Postcards from the Edge, becoming one of the industry's earliest and boldest voices on the subject. She died on December 27, 2016, at 60, and in one of the cruelest coincidences in entertainment history, her mother Debbie Reynolds died of a stroke the very next day. Yet the film's true musical elder was only just getting started, at 72. In an elevator between takes, the 72-year-old man playing Curtis, the orphanage janitor who taught Jake and Elwood everything they knew about the blues, began singing Summertime completely unprompted, and the seasoned musicians around him went silent, stunned that a voice that powerful still existed inside him. That man was Calloway, a genuine legend of the Harlem Renaissance who had once been the first black musician to sell 1 million records with a single song, Minnie the Moocher, the very number he performs in White Tails during the film's unforgettable climax. By 1980, his career had cooled considerably, and this small supporting role became an unlikely second act that carried him until his death. His personal life stood in quiet contrast to the wild jazz-age stereotypes of his youth, when he was known as a notorious gambler. He married Zulmi McNeil in 1953, and the two stayed together until he died in 1994 at 86, raising daughters including jazz singer Chris Calloway. Few people realize he also documented an entire era of American slang in his 1938 Hepster's Dictionary, or that his dance moves were traced frame by frame to animate Betty Boop cartoons decades earlier. Today, his grandson keeps the Calloway Orchestra touring, though the film's other musical preacher had a far more turbulent road behind the pulpit. The Reverend Cleophas James delivers his sermon at the Triple Rock Baptist Church with such ferocity that Jake sees the literal light, and James Brown, the man behind the collar, refused to fake a single second of it. Known for never singing a song the same way twice, he could not lip-sync convincingly, so the crew let him perform live against the playback, creating a hybrid recording that took months to edit into shape. He was 47 that year, and by his own account, the godfather of soul was fading, squeezed out by disco and buried in financial trouble, until this small role and Rocky IV pulled him back into the spotlight and gave him the hit Living in America. His path there had started in a one-room shack in South Carolina, wearing potato sacks as a child, Before he built an empire, he ran with iron discipline, fining his own band members for scuffed shoes. His personal life carried none of that same control. Married 4 times, he acknowledged at least 9 children, and in 1988 led police on a cross-state chase that ended in a 6-year sentence. His family spent 15 years fighting over his estate after his death in 2006, a battle finally resolved in February 2026, with the bulk of his fortune funding scholarships exactly as he had requested. Standing just feet from James Brown as the choir soloist lifting Old Landmark to the rafters of the Triple Rock, Chaka Khan remembered the scene taking hours to film, yet the energy never dropped because Brown stayed fully in preacher character even when the cameras cut. She was 26 then, already the front woman of Rufus, and a rising solo star fresh off the anthem I'm Every Woman, a song that would soon make her the Queen of Funk with 10 Grammys. Long before that, as a teenager in Chicago, she had been a member of the Black Panther Party, an early sign of a woman unwilling to perform what was expected of her. Her personal life moved through 2 early marriages, to Hassan Khan and later Richard Holland, and a relationship with producer Doug Rashid, though in later years she has kept her romantic life largely out of view, focusing instead on her 2 children, Melanie and Damien. What she has spoken about openly is harder, a decades-long struggle with prescription painkillers and alcohol that finally led her into rehab in 2016 and out the other side into lasting sobriety. Now 73, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2023 and remains out on her 2026 celebration tour, still commanding a stage the way she once commanded that choir. They called him the Colonel on set, and the nickname had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with the fact that Steve Cropper was the only member of the Blues Brothers band who could keep the rest of the group on schedule during a shoot fueled by chaos in every direction. Playing himself essentially as the band's steady lead guitarist, Cropper had already shaped the sound of American music before he ever picked up this role, co-writing Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay with Otis Redding and In the Midnight Hour with Wilson Pickett as the architect of the Stax sound in Memphis. He was 38 during filming and has spent much of his later career fighting for the royalties and recognition Stax denied him after the label collapsed into bankruptcy in the 1970s, a quieter but no less demanding battle than anything that happened on camera. His marriage to Angel Cropper, which began in 1988, has remained one of the steadiest relationships among the entire cast, a mirror of the reliability that earned him his nickname in the first place. Now 84, he is still recognized for a signature style built on a clean Fender Telecaster tone with no pedals or effects, and he released a new solo album, Friendly Town, as recently as 2024, proof that the Colonel never really left his post. She actually struck Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi with her wooden ruler during rehearsals, not out of anger but because their chaotic energy as inmates of Sister Mary Stigmata's orphanage made her laugh, and she wanted them to feel exactly how the Penguin would respond to it. Kathleen Freeman was 61 that year, already decades into a career built entirely inside show business, having been born into a vaudeville family that gave her no other path than performing. She never married, choosing instead to keep her personal world almost entirely out of public view, letting the work itself stand in for everything else people might have wanted to know about her. That work was staggering in its range, nearly 100 films, including her turn as the exacting vocal coach in Singin' in the Rain, and countless appearances alongside Jerry Lewis, later stretching into voice roles in Hercules and Shrek as animation discovered her decades after Hollywood first had. She was diagnosed with lung cancer shortly before her death in 2001 at 82, and rather than step away, she kept performing on Broadway in The Full Monty until just 5 days before she passed, closing out a lifetime on stage exactly where she had always wanted to be. While Frank Oz was on screen for barely a minute as the corrections officer meticulously returning Jake's belongings, right down to one soiled glove, he was in the middle of shaping one of the most iconic characters in film history on an entirely different set. Around this same period, Oz was creating the physical movements and voice of Yoda for The Empire Strikes Back, work that would define a generation of movie-going even as this small bureaucratic cameo, taken purely as a favor to his friend and director John Landis, barely registered as a footnote in his own career. That deliberate, soul-crushing slowness in counting out Jake's possessions was entirely his own improvisation, a small joke about prison tedium from a man already famous as Jim Henson's closest collaborator, the puppeteer behind Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, and Cookie Monster. He later became a respected director himself, making Little Shop of Horrors and The Birdcage, and built a family life that included 2 marriages, first to Robin Gaine and later to Victoria Labalme, along with 3 sons and a daughter. Now 82, he remains outspoken about how the Muppets have been handled since Disney's acquisition, and he made a high-profile appearance at a Muppet Anniversary Gala in early 2026, still protecting the characters he spent a lifetime bringing to life. Inside the real, abandoned Dixie Square Mall, with actual debris flying and the driving genuinely dangerous, Stephen Williams performed many of his own reaction shots as Trooper Mount, one half of the relentless police duo chasing the Bluesmobile alongside Trooper Burton Mercer. Williams was 31 during filming, a former model and postal worker from Memphis who had only recently transitioned from Chicago stage acting into film, and this early role helped launch a career that would stretch across decades of American television. He went on to become Captain Adam Fuller on 21 Jump Street and the shadowy Mr. X on The X-Files, later earning cult status among horror fans as Creighton Duke in Jason Goes to Hell. Behind that steady, authoritative presence was a quieter frustration he has spoken about openly: the difficulty of being a black character actor in the 1970s and 1980s, and the constant fight to make his roles more than the tough cop stereotype expected of him. He is a veteran of the United States Army who served during the Vietnam War era, and he has kept his personal life almost entirely out of the public record. Now 77, he still appears on the convention circuit, a familiar face to fans of both The X-Files and Supernatural, where he later played Rufus Turner. One night during filming, John Landis broke into John Belushi's trailer, found a mountain of cocaine sitting on the table, and flushed it down the toilet himself, triggering a physical confrontation between 2 men who were nonetheless close friends. Landis was not only the director steering this sprawling production, but also appeared on camera himself as Trooper LaFong, one of the officers caught in the film's legendary highway pileup, wearing the heavy glasses that famously fly off his face on impact. At 29, fresh off directing Animal House and the Kentucky Fried Movie, he insisted on using real cars for every stunt, setting a world record at the time for the most vehicles destroyed in a single film at 103. He married costume designer Deborah Nadulman Landis in 1980, having met her on Animal House, and the couple raised 2 children, including Max Landis, who became a screenwriter in his own right. 2 years after this film's release, tragedy struck his set again, far more seriously, when actor Vic Morrow and 2 child performers were killed in a helicopter accident during Twilight Zone, the movie. Landis was tried and acquitted of involuntary manslaughter, but the accident reshaped safety regulations across the entire industry and followed him for the rest of his career. Moment quite like the one John Belushi was living as he pulled on Joliet Jake's fedora and sunglasses. The same year, he simultaneously held the #1 late-night show with Saturday Night Live, the #1 movie with Animal House, and the #1 album with Briefcase Full of Blues. He was 30 that year, the son of Albanian immigrants and older brother to future actor James Belushi, married since 1976 to his high school sweetheart Judith Belushi Pisano, a relationship that grounded him even as everything else around him spun faster and faster. On set, that speed showed itself in stranger ways. During one night shoot, he simply vanished, and Aykroyd found him asleep on a stranger's couch after wandering into a random Chicago home, raiding the fridge and falling asleep while the bewildered homeowners looked on. The production budgeted for what crew members quietly called late-night expenses, a fund that existed to keep everyone awake, a reflection of the addiction to cocaine and heroin already shaping his life behind the performance. He died on March 5, 1982, at 33. Judy, his widow, spent the rest of her life protecting his legacy until her own death in 2024, leaving an archive that inspired a new documentary on his influence, ensuring the mission from God never really ended. Was the real mission from God worth what it cost Jake in the end? If that question stays with you, subscribe to Classic Hollywood Echoes for more real stories behind the classics.